And hello, we are on air. And hello, everyone. Carlos here. Um, we are going to talk today on this What's Up in Archaeology, 16th of May, alcohol and our love affair with it. Also, afterwards, I'm going to have a question and answers with the guests which I've invited. Welcome, Modwain. How are you, my friend?
Good day, people. Well, I'm doing quite all right, if not for my, how do you call it, hay fever. But other than that, I'm doing a-okay. Sniffing and
Awesome.
sneezing.
Yeah, hay fever. Yeah, hay fevers can be a bitch.
Yeah,
Okay,
especially around the time.
I'm going to share the screen. And now the first part's going to be that tunnel of death, because I have to then share the actual article. And today we're going to talk about alcohol consumption. As you all know, I'm a bit of a drunkard. Not really. I love my alcohol. I want to get this a bit bigger. There we go. And we're going to talk about alcohol, how we clean. If you can say we evolved with alcohol consumption, because alcohol consumption is found not just in hominins and humans, but it also found in other species. For example, I'm sure many of people have seen David Attenborough's life, those documentaries on life. Basically, I think it's called Life. In fact, isn't it so, Modwain?
I can't remember, to be honest.
David Attenborough. I know
the programs you mean, but I don't know what they're called. For example, how elephants make alcohol themselves in their trunk, for example.
Well, they don't. Yeah, they do, but they also look for really fermented fruits that them and the baboons, deer. There's documentaries which shows those scenes, so it's not exclusively to us. But this article, which I'm going to talk about, is Neolithic origins of actually eating really fermented fruit that has small quantities of alcohol. I'd say about 3 or 4%. That would be the main. Because then the bacteria would start breaking down the fruit into and consuming the alcohol that's produced. Life on Earth. Thank you, Warped Reflections. You are my hero. So let's get on with the article. It starts off bringing up in civilization. Did our Neolithic ancestors turn to agriculture so they could seize? Be sure of the tipple. Okay. This is a good thing. Patrick McGovern thinks so, that the Neolithic revolution, where we became food producers instead of food gatherers, is all to do with alcohol. Okay. Well, I'll bit of grain. I'll entertain this theory. Let's have a look at what he says. This is from the Spiegel, by the way. I was going to link to a National Geographic article, but the bloody cunts are sort of behind the paywall. And when you open it, you can get about a quarter of the way down the article, and then it asks you to fucking register and subscribe and all that shit. So I won't be using that one. I didn't even link it in the description. Yeah. As always, all the sources are in the description. I linked this article plus some more scientific papers that deals with alcohol consumption and production in the prehistoric period. So be good people and read them, because I put them there for your entertainment and your education. It's a good thing to do. So let's get to what it says. It turns out that the fall of man probably didn't begin with an apple. More likely, it was a handful of mushy figs that first led mankind astray.
Astray from where, though? That's my first question.
Yeah, and the fall of man. I was going to ask you, what did you think about it? Turns out the fall of man. Really?
Yeah, no, I mean, I can understand that because you want to dramatize it. So mankind has fallen. Okay, fallen off of what? But no, it was more likely it was a handful of mushy figs that first led humankind astray. Astray from what? Is there a straight and narrow what we've missed? Why don't we know what that straight and narrow is anymore? It's
exactly. That's it's sort of I've already said that other animals also do that naturally. Baboons, elephants, primates. Every primate actually deliberately searches for the most extra ripe fruit that can contain some form of a little bit of alcohol, enough alcohol to get them to get them high. In fact, so
yeah, but it's not.
Go on.
It's not even mammals. I mean, nearly all animals find way to intoxicate themselves.
Absolutely, yes.
I said nearly. I should rephrase that. All animals find ways to intoxicate themselves. We know this. Even birds do.
Yes, and not just by fermented fruits, but also from grains that have been infected with certain fungi, for example.
Yeah.
And certain fungi that fucking shrooms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if we know this, then I mean, yes, humankind is led astray. Then I'm really curious, what is this straight and narrow that humankind no longer walks on, but all the other animals don't walk on either? It's a little bit double.
Yeah, exactly. So let's continue. We've already settled that we're not really led astray, but it's a nice. God, this guy doesn't. This guy is a teetotaler, for example. The Frank Thaddeus is now. Here is excuse me. Here is how the story began. Prehistoric man picking up some dropped fruits from the ground and popped it unsuspectingly into his or her mouth. The first effect was nothing more than an agreeable bittersweet flavor spreading across the palate. But as alcohol entered the bloodstream, the brain started sending out a new message. Whatever it was, I want more of it. Yes, that's perfectly a good description of what the early of low alcoholic drinks can do to you, and etc. etc. Now,
I don't know. It sounds a little bit. It sounds a little bit oversimplified.
No, it is that simple. No, it's actually that simple. Yes, that's what other animals that are not humans do. So it's perfectly. You forget. Sometimes the simplest answer is the best answer. He's doing it well. He started off okay. Humankind's first encounter with alcohol in the form of fermented fruit probably occurred in just an accidental fashion. Yes, it certainly probably did. But
they didn't have distilleries back then.
Exactly. Humankind's, I would say, going back to Homo. Homo, the first Homo species.
I would go back even further than that. I seriously would. Every animal out there does this.
Yeah.
Every. So I mean, you can have to be hominid to do this. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. But once they were familiar with the effect, archaeologist Patrick McGovern believes humans stopped at nothing in their pursuit of frequent intoxication. That is a fucking assertion that he better presents really good evidence.
Well, funny enough, this assertion, I have no problem following this assertion because, again, this is what we see in all animals. As BJ Price said in the chat, catnip led my cat astray. All animals search for something to dull reality, so to speak. We all do. Everything that lives does. So I'm willing to believe that humans stopped. Well, I don't think they stopped at nothing, but I will believe that they would put some effort in finding more of it. I'm willing to believe that.
But let's get back to the start. This article claims that Patrick McGovern, that our Neolithic ancestors turned to agriculture so they could be sure of the tipple. That's the premise.
Yeah, I don't think that, because at that point in time they didn't know how to do it.
Well, yeah, but this guy, Patrick McGovern, thinks so.
No,
Right. So
that wouldn't
this is
make
the
sense.
premise. This is the premise where we start off. That's how you know. I don't have to tell you how the scientific method works, and many people who aren't who don't do any form of scientific um, studies and so on, they probably he has to present now evidence to back up this claim, and that's what we're gonna investigate. So let's get back to where he says. They stop at nothing in pursuit of frequent intoxication. So I'll just interrupt there. Let's ignore the possible at the beginning. I've talked about this at the beginning of agricultural production. It was not a reliable source. That's why hunting was possibly the main food gathering, food acquirement instead of the actual food production, because it was just at the beginning. But once agriculture became established and hunting and gathering became a minor role in acquiring food, then that's what I'm talking about. Ignore that fact that it's the primary food source, so you won't die of starvation. That's what I want to emphasize here on his premise, not on whatever. He's making a premise, so he's making an assertion. We have to now debunk it or see if he presented any facts. A secure form of alcohol appears to have been part of human communities' basic requirements much earlier than was long believed, as early as around 9,000 years ago. Okay, that's a good round figure. 9,000 years ago. We'll ignore the fact that all hominins and all other animals from the beginning of a fruit got intoxicated, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, well before that. And
exactly.
9,000 years ago, didn't we already have a lot of agriculture by then?
It was still it was just beginning to be the main source. 9,000. It started about 12,000 years ago. That's when the agriculture really started. But it took 3,000 years before it became the primary food procurement.
Yeah, but that was more of, how do you call it, storing food than actually growing food. I mean, agriculture wasn't only just growing food. Once they knew how to grow it, the problem was you also had to store it. Once they
that came about the same time. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that came around 9,000.
Yeah. Was the pre-pottery pre-pottery Neolithic B and pottery. They were very, very. For example, in the Levant and in the Anatolian highlands, where the first, you can see the first pottery production. You can tell them they happened more or less about that time. Yeah, give or take 500 years, because this was a period of change that you wouldn't believe. It's like the 20th century. The change in technology was just exploding. So yeah. So back to the article. Long before the invention of the wheel, inhabitants of the Neolithic village of Jihua in China were brewing a type of mead with an alcohol content of 10%. McGovern recently discovered. Now, China's Neolithic is not the same as the West's Neolithic.
Yeah, I just wanted to say they were well ahead of us.
No, they were contemporary, but they had just different. We named them differently, but it's the same. Yeah, exactly. There's no real difference. They independently developed agriculture, give or take 1,000, 2,000 years from the West's side. 3,000. They domesticated rice and wheat because it was spread, and so give or take 9,000 to 7,000. He just picked a number. This article just picks a number, but it's a range of number. It's a range of years.
I'm more curious to. They were brewing a type of mead.
Yeah, they were fermenting honey.
Yeah, so they were fermenting honey.
Yeah, that's
the fermenting of honey is not that much to do with agriculture.
No, so see, exactly. The West's, the Middle East, what we call the Fertile Crescent. That's where agriculture began here. The first real agriculture began here before it was independently invented in the Far East. They were also probably brewing mead by that time, or even earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that 12,000-year-old temple from the pre-pottery Neolithic A period, the Gebulgi Tepe, or what the fuck you pronounce that shit, would have been brewing mead as well, because you just need honey and water to brew mead. You don't need anything else.
No, you don't really need anything else. Well, but a bit of yeast might be nice, but
yeast would be any of the grains. They just drop in a few grains from the natural grains, or some fruit or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's not hard. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and even in some of the wild honeycomb type things, they would have been yeast naturally growing, even though the bees are very antiseptic and they produce some antiseptic things that protects the yeast from any attacks, biological attacks. This almost sounds like thing, but yeah. So that would be the first one. I agree with it. Yes, firstly would be eating the extra ripe fruit, then actually fermenting honey, for example.
Yeah, I'm a bit. I think it would be first eating extra ripe fruit, then fermenting the fruit, then fermenting the fruit with honey. Because the step with adding honey is not natural. It's not logical. They started doing that, I assume, because they were experimenting.
Could be, yep. It's a good hypothesis. We don't actually. No one knows. He's presenting just a hype. McGovern is just presenting a hypothesis.
But we don't know how. It's illogical to assume that they would just add and started fermenting honey if there was no basis to do so. Now we know about the fruits. We know about fermentation. So once they learn more about fermentation, that's when they start experimenting with more fermentation. First fermentation with water, then fermentation with other materials like honey.
Oh yeah, yes. With the fruits, they would crush fruits, and yes. Someone would have figured out how to actually say, we have fruits here, ripe fruit, but they're not alcoholic. But we also have some extra ripe fruits from, say, the first ones would have been berries. It would have been all berry type fruits that they would have got, because apples is nothing like our apples now. We have here. Crab apples is the closest we have to the wild apples, and they have to be fucking put in, they have to be frozen before they become sweet.
And I really think they started fermenting fruits, and whilst they were fermenting fruits, once they got the idea of fermenting fruits and maybe even fermenting fruits with water, then they started fermenting fruits with herbs, and they just started trying new stuff out, because that is the one thing that we still have from our ancestors, stuff to try out.
Herbs.
Trying stuff out.
Herbs would be much later. For this period of time, what they're talking about is just basically the easiest fermentation. Crush some fruits inside a mortar and pestle or some vessel. You can even a basket or something. That they knew how to make waterproof baskets, by the way, or even a fur like the stomach of an animal covered with fur to protect it. Put in the fruit and it would ferment.
Yeah.
So yeah. So let's get back to the article. McGovern analyzed clay shards found during excavation in China's Yellow River Valley at his biomolecular archaeological laboratory in Cuisine. That's in Pennsylvania. Fermented beverages and cuisine, fermented beverages and the health of University of Pennsylvania Museum. The bearded archaeologist, we had to know he was a bearded archaeologist, okay, is recognized around the world as an expert when it comes to identifying traces of alcoholic drinks in prehistoric finds. He ran so-called liquid chromatography coupled with mass spectrometry in the clay remnants of Asia and found traces of tartaric acid, one of the main acids present in wine, beeswax in the shard spores. Spores would be from a fungi.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
in all
fungi.
fairness,
Bacteria.
in all fairness, if they found beeswax in shard spores, that basically tells me that they use this to make cups and stuff, vessels, fluid tight, because you use
Exactly,
beeswax to make sure that it doesn't run through the dirt and the earth and the whatnots.
Yeah, perfectly. Yep. It appears that prehistoric humans in China combined fruit and honey in an intoxicating brew. It appears that's the operative word.
But if he but if he bases it on finding tartaric acids and beeswax in shards, then I'm like, okay, the tartaric acids I can understand because wine, but the beeswax, I'm sorry, if I have a clay cup or a clay bowl, and I want to make sure that it's safe to put liquids in, I need something to protect it. And that's where the bee wax comes in. But you don't put beeswax in mead.
No, you don't. No. Even if it was used to cover for example, the lid, so it would be probably airtight or some form. Yeah, that you could use the beeswax there. Doesn't necessarily mean that the mead was. When you fire a clay, you can add glazes, and they were adding glazes about that time. They were making quite waterproof vessels from the beginning. So yeah,
and I assume that stuff like beeswax would have been used for that as well.
Yes, yes, exactly, yes. Or even beeswax could be used as the molds. The substitution molds.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I mean,
it's quite advanced, but I think there would be more later. I reckon the beeswax was used to seal. That's why they found it.
Yeah, but it's unregular. It's unrealistic to say, okay, so we found tartaric acid and beeswax, therefore mead.
Mead, yeah. Well, yeah. No.
It doesn't make sense. Okay, so they had beeswax, so they did have honey, but that doesn't mean that they also made mead. I mean, I'm not saying they couldn't have, but wouldn't you then also find other things than just beeswax?
Yeah, exactly, because alcohol leaves residue, chemical residue. They could have found that, but they did because they found that was mead. So, the clever survival strategy. Additionally, plant sterols, that's alcohols, point to wild rice as an ingredient. Lacking any knowledge of chemistry, prehistoric hunters, eager for the intoxicating effect of alcohol, apparently mixed clumps of rice with saliva to break down the starches in the grain and convert them into malt sugar. Now, we're going from mead to beer here. This is basically, he's going from mead, which is just fermented honey and water, to actually producing beer. What he's describing here, chewing the rice. Rice is a grain. If you chew the grain, you break down the starches. They are converted into malt. If they could have even been boiled, and then they ferment naturally into beer.
Yeah.
So he's going everywhere, this guy. This article's going from everywhere. These pioneering brewers would then spit the chewed up rice into the brew. Husks and yeasty foam floated to the top of the liquid so that they could use long straws to drink the narrow-necked jug from narrow-necked jugs. Alcohol is still consumed in that way in some regions of China. Okay. Do you want to add something? Because there's nothing really to add. This is he just stated that they continue to do that, and he's trying to what they're doing now, trying to take it back in time.
Yeah, it seems
because
like
they found something.
yeah, it seems like retro engineering history. I found this.
Which,
I
yeah.
want this to be the answer. Therefore, this is the explanation.
Yeah, because I can't really add anything. It doesn't make sense to me. I know how archaeology works, experimental archaeology works, and I know how that you can shit. I hope I didn't drop. No, okay. You can extrapolate from modern observance of behavior into the past. It's valid. Gathering. I can't think of. I'll think of an example. For example, I'll take the Kusan. How they hunt? They hunt running. They run down the prey. They can run all day, much further than the prey. That's been documented, and you can extrapolate. That was a hunting technique that was
it was used. I mean,
developed.
that's how we became the best hunters out there, because we wouldn't kill our prey. We would run them to death.
Run them down, yeah. But that was first observed and possibly first technique from the Homo erectus, because of their stature, and they've made a mechanical, biomechanical analysis of the skeleton. He was a long distance runner. I made a hangout about that, or video about that, and the marathon man. It's in my video. I talked about that. Yes, that's how their technique. You see how we get modern examples and we find ancient equivalents, and we can sort of extrapolate that maybe this is how that is. It's not definite, which this guy's trying to do. This is him saying it's definite that they did this way.
There's no way to say it's for sure.
Exactly, it's wrong. So let's continue. McGovern says this early fermentation process is a clever survival strategy. Consuming high-energy sugar and alcohol was a fabulous solution for surviving in a hostile environment with few natural resources. Oh, this is fucking awesome.
Then they don't understand what alcohol is.
Exactly. That's
consuming high energy sugar, yes, but consuming high energy sugar and alcohol have a detrimental effect on us.
That's just the first part. The second part is the most telling. A solution for surviving in a hostile environment with few resources. Now let's go back 9,000 years ago. I can describe shit. That's possibly a gift I have. That's what I'm really good at. I'm shit at monologuing. I'm getting better, but I'm still crap at that. I can't do a video to save my life like you guys can, but I can imagine and I can do thought experiments. So let's go back 9,000 years ago to what he's describing. We are beginning in China. Even we were hunter-gatherers for a long time, and we are just beginning to switch our economy into agriculture. So we're already harvesting wild rice, which we plant which we purposely plant, even though we're still possibly moving within the environment for the countryside or our range.
That would kind of mean that it's not in a hostile environment, because you would pick the best environment to plant stuff, and there wouldn't be new natural resources because you planted the natural resources. There would be a relative abundance of natural resources.
Exactly. Even though other animals would possibly eat some of it, there would still be a lot that you could.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that. It's a very good point.
You there? Hello?
Yeah, I'm still here. I just needed to blow my nose, so that's why I muted myself for a second.
God, I thought I went back. Yeah. So the environment was hostile, but that we were already beginning to quote unquote tame it. Right. They would have still been semi-nomadic. So they would roam their range, possibly still gathering some at 9,000 years ago. This is 9,000 years ago. It was, especially in the Far East, it was still the beginning of them switching their economies into agriculture. In the Levant area, the Near East, where Turkey and the Fertile Crescent, where Turkey, Syria, Israel, Iraq, sorry, they would have been almost settled down and actively planting the grains and having pastoral. They would have had sheep, goats by then, and later on, a couple of thousand years later, cattle and horses and so on. So here in China, they would have just beginning to do that same pattern.
Yeah.
Right. So they would not spend their time to grow rice just to make alcohol. It was a prime resource, food resource. They would not waste that.
The main goal wouldn't
precious.
be alcohol. The main goal would be food.
No, food, exactly. The alcohol is a byproduct. They could have left some. They could have produced a small amount of it, as every culture does.
Yeah, if they had enough resources for it.
Exactly. Yeah, but they would have already been planning that. They could have planned for. Okay, we have 1% of our harvest. We can make some laughing juice, for example. So that sort of explains that. This is incredible. This is a really good bad article. Glad I found it. I was reading through the National Geographic one. It was much better than this one. I mean, wow.
Well,
they explained it to me.
They do put a lot of assumes and assumptions in there, and a bunch of the assumptions are even contradicting themselves.
Perfectly, yeah. We went from mead to beer. That's what beer is.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows beer is gins. Well, mead is not a fermented grain; it's a fermented honey, and wine is fruit. You can have wine. That's a technique. We use grapes now, but wine is technically every fruit that you can make wine out of.
Yeah.
So the most recent finds in China are consistent with McGovern's chain of evidence. Oh, yes, they are. No, they're not. Which suggests that the craft of making alcohol spread rapidly to various locations around the world during the Neolithic period. No, absolutely not. No.
I would think
they were invented independently, locally.
Mm-hmm.
There was not spread. Agriculture, yes, could have been spread, not alcohol making, because alcohol making predates agriculture.
And every main culture has its own how do you call it?
Exactly.
Ways of doing it.
Because the Neolithic period in the western part of Eurasia is not the same, does not correspond with the Neolithic period of the eastern parts of Eurasia. But he's correct here. Shamans and village alchemists, quote unquote, nice word. This guy went to the dictionary. Mixed fruits, herbs, spices, and grains together in pots. The Neolithic period is divided into three parts. We have the Neolithic. Neolithic A is when we were moving into the agricultural and pastoral system. The pre-pottery Neolithic B, which corresponds with a increasingly sedentary lifestyle and less nomadic way of life, and when that later, which is a couple of 100 years, is the invention of pottery and storage. So he's wrong. Until they formed the drinkable concoction. But that wasn't enough for McGovern. I can almost do a Scottish accent trying to speak like McGovern, but he's an American, so I won't do that. He carried the theory much further, aiming a complete reinterpretation of humanity's history. His bold thesis, which he lays out in the book Uncorking the Past, A Quest for Wine, Beer, and Other Alcoholic Beverages, states that agriculture And with the entire Neolithic revolution, which began about 11,000 years ago, 12,000, 11,000, close enough, ultimately results of the irrepressible impulse towards drinking and intoxication. This is work. No,
it doesn't really make sense. Especially if this were the case, we do know that, as I said, alcohol has a detrimental effect on us. So that would stunt the growth of our societies, and it didn't.
Exactly. It would just like even mentions it here. Shamans and village alchemists. What do they do? What do they do? What does a shaman do?
Well, a shaman is like a healer, and a village
Exactly.
didn't have alchemists. I mean, they didn't have alchemism until what, the Middle Ages?
It's let's forget about this fucking stupid word that he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. It was just shamans. They were the ones that produced. Yeah, they were shamans. Okay.
You had shamans, and you could have had herb women, herb ladies.
The shaman is male or female. It's in the discriminate. Yeah. It's someone who knew who would have been passed on the knowledge of the plants, that medicine type thing and everything. So they were the only ones that would have been producing any form of higher chemical mixtures and solutions and all that shit.
And they would go ahead in imbibing certain materials, and they would smoke certain materials. Smoking was still the most common way to get altered perception, not alcohol.
Well, I can't see you can smoke salvia. So salvia is Eurasian. Yeah. And you have hemp, which is also southern.
And smoking like we do now is one way, but I'm pretty sure, from what I've learned from my works, so to speak, as a reenactor, they didn't smoke cigarettes or pipe. Pipe came way later, but sit around the campfire and throw some stuff on the fire, and it will already affect you.
Yes, of course they did. They would have. They would have, exactly. They don't smoke it as we do. Just what you said. Yes, I'm sending someone else a link. Okay, I sent it. Yes, the shamans would not say to the whole tribe, because this is tribal for now. It's not. It's extended family, so it'd still be tribal. It's not up to the next phase, which would have been a chiefdom who had a bigger number of people that a chieftain would control. So yeah, it's between that. That's what pre-pottery Neolithic B gave rise to, the chieftains. Yeah. So he wouldn't have said to the other people, let's gather up all these food resources. We don't need it to eat, and let's make booze. No,
I can't imagine that. I mean,
exactly.
Food is more important than anything else. Why did they go over to agriculture? Because it was a more steady supply of food, which it still wasn't in the beginning, but the idea of it was.
It became really, really stable, surprisingly, in the 17th century.
Yeah,
17th to 18th century, when the British, the English, oh god, I hate names. The Industrial Revolution actually moved agriculture into an extra large realm. Yes, the Romans bettered it. Really expanded it. The Arabs expanded it. All those classical civilizations before that, the Egyptians, etc., they expanded it,
but it
really
still
well.
wasn't enough.
But it's still it was still very, very dependent on natural cycles.
Yeah.
Whereas the Industrial Revolution,
we can even see how this happened, though, because if we look at even in the 20th century, 1958, out of my head, China did the Great Leap Forward. And because of the Great Leap Forward, they basically destroyed their own agriculture, and they had a famine for
Exactly.
several
Yes.
years. So, I
Yes.
mean, we like to think that we have our agriculture all figured out, but in reality, it's still pretty fragile.
Completely. Yes. So
Mm.
he says, let's get back to the article. He
Oh,
says
yeah.
the available evidence suggests that our ancestors in Asia, Mexico, Americas,
The Americans, yeah.
and Africa cultivated wheat, Eurasia, rice, West Asia, corn, the Americas, barley, Eurasia, Africa, and millet, primarily Middle East, Central Asia. Primarily for the purpose of primarily producing alcoholic beverages. Yes, Mr. McGovern. While they were at it, he believes drink-loving early civilizations managed to ensure the basic survival. Now, let's hold on here. Early civilizations. That would have been Sumeria, I think, is the earliest one. 8,000 years ago, 6,000 BC. No, 4,000 BC. 4,000 BC. Just the beginning of the Bronze Age. 4 to 5,000 BC, exactly. The beginning of the Bronze Age. So, no, they would not have been producing grains, which they would need to feed their increasingly growing population. That's where we had our first population explosion to make fucking beer.
Yeah, it's not as if they have
Oh,
spare food lying around. It's almost as
no.
if he thinks, well, they needed like a ton of grain, so they created 2 tons of grain so that they had enough to create alcohol. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't. You know, you need, if you produce a ton of grain, you could produce enough alcohol with 20 kilograms of grain, diluted enough, or get some fermentation going, and put it in a lot of jars with 10 kilograms of grain, and you have a lot of alcohol without actually touching the food source. From 10 or 20 kilograms. The more, the merrier, of course. But if that's what I can only see possibility of happening. But no, this is totally wrong. The primary finality of agriculture is for food.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's the main
so,
thing you need. You need to survive. You need to eat.
yeah. Archaeologists have long pondered the question of which came first, bread or beer. Bread.
No.
Bread.
It depends on. No, there's no doubt about it. But it depends on what you would call bread. Fair enough.
Bread is easy. I can tell you what archaeologists think bread is.
Water, grains, and maybe something else.
Just
like...
water and grains. Just water and grains. I'll tell you how Homo sapiens have been harvesting wild grains. And not just Homo sapiens, even Neanderthals, as they've been shown that they had the berries. And a recent study where they found that a few examples of Neanderthals had no meat diet, and the vegans are all fucking happy about that. They found that they've harvested natural grains since forever. We are omnivores. We eat everything: meat, grains, food, all types of food. So, a good way to get more nutrition out of grains, for example, is you grind them.
Yeah,
there are grindstones from about 15 to 20,000 years ago.
You grind it because you already break down the how do you call it?
You break down the starches.
Yeah,
you make it easy. You mix a bit of water, and you make easy cakes, which you could then bake on top of a hot stone.
Yeah, but basically you make flatbread.
Yes, exactly. There we go. So that answers the question. What came first? Bread.
Yeah.
And we move on. So it surmises that the prehistoric humans didn't initially have the ability to master the very complex process of brewing beer. Of course not, because beer, the first signs of beer come from Egypt, that early kingdoms of Egypt, and they were
3,000?
Bronze
4,000?
Age. Yeah, about that, yeah. Bronze Age, yeah. 4,000, about that. So, bread wins by about 10,000 years.
Easily.
Easily. So, yeah. Where was I? However, they were even more incapable of baking bread. No, you fucking. I'm gonna channel my Sargon. No, you fucking idiot. And I can't laugh now, so just imagine I'm laughing. I love his laugh, by the way. From which wild grains are extremely unsuitable. No, they are not. They are completely suitable. You grind them and you make flatbreads, for fuck's sake. They would have had first to separate the tiny grains from the shaft, which they used stones to do that. There, we found stones in France, in Spain, in the Carmel Cave.
We found
in Israel. I want to go to Israel because it's all there.
Yeah, we've actually found kilns.
Yes,
not simple kilns, but we found them, and I mean we found kilns in underground locations where they were basically the same as they were not hundreds, thousands of years ago.
Yeah, but that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about he's talking about harvesting grains. Look what he says. They would have first to separate the tiny grains from the chaff, with their yield hardly worth the great effort.
Yeah,
they could easily harvest 20 kilograms of grains in about an afternoon, using about that. It's been calculated. I'm trying to remember out of my head. With about 15 people.
Mm-hmm.
And they would have gotten enough grains to feed those 15 people for about 3 or 4 days easily.
And they would have done that. I mean, come on,
yes.
You're talking about your survival. What's more important? Oh, am I going
That's
to?
That's what the women did.
Well,
and the children. Yes, but while the men were hunting.
If the men were hunting, then okay, then it was just the women. But this sort of thing. I mean, if it would have taken a week to do, they would have done it because it's food, it's survival.
But they didn't need it. This is how it's been. The model of what we know of how the hunter gatherers. We're talking about hunter gathering. He's trying to say, let's say 15,000 years ago, before agriculture, the men had developed the microlith, so they were using bows and arrows by then.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the Solutrean, my absolute my specialty. I did my thesis on the Solutrean period. It's about 22,000 to my memory is sometimes fast. To about 17,000 years ago. That period. It's a culture, modern human culture, before the Magdalenian, and after the Magdalenian, before we get into the Neolithic period. So, while the men were actually out hunting, middle-sized games, because the megafauna were beginning to become rarer and rarer. So the men were hunting the animals. The women and the children and the elderly people would just gather. Yeah. So they had baskets, either on their backs or their fronts. This is how much effort you need to harvest grains. You go into a field, you get either a bone that's been shaped enough to where you grab a few stalks of the grass, and you pass that tool between your thumb and that, and you scrape, and the seeds fall into the basket. You could do that moving. So, like I said, in about half an hour to an hour, you could get about 5 to 10 kilograms if about 10, 15 people were doing it. Children, the women, the elderly.
Mm-hmm.
Easily. It's not labor intensive. What he's trying to suggest, it's labor intensive. No, the effort is they were moving while they stopped and picked up a root. Another one, they slings or arrows or some other weapons or tools to hunt small game, and that in about an afternoon they could have had a couple of kilos of grain, 3 or 4 hares, birds, and all that shit, and roots, and take it back. While the men, if they were unlucky, they had food. But if they were lucky, they had complementary food.
Yeah. And that's
and if
when you're in a hunter-gathering society, you need complementary food, because
they had, yes,
that creates a bigger chance of survival.
That's why it's the hunter-gatherers. It's been made. A study's been made. They had much more leisure time than agriculture has. We have only caught up with their amount of leisure time about just after the 20th century, basically.
Which makes sense, because agriculture means that you need to constantly be aware of what's going on.
Exactly, yeah. So, and he's totally wrong. This guy's wrong, and he barely. Where is it? What a great effort. If anything, the earliest bakers probably made nothing more than barely palatable type of rough bread. Oh, go
I
screw
don't
yourself.
agree with that, because I've actually made flatbreads. I made
containing
flatbreads.
Unwanted additions of the grain's many husks.
Unwanted. Fucking hell. No, those are fibers. You need them.
That's what I was going to say. That we are actively looking for unhusked grains as for fiber.
We need that bloody crap. And I mean, I've made flatbread. Okay, not on a stone. I used a metal plate, more or less, on a fire. Where Viking reenactments. So we're talking about 900 to 1200. You can actually make flatbread in a pan.
Exactly.
Or in a mill,
and they are quite delicious if you grow. You get
especially if you make them. For example, if you already made a bit of meat and on an iron pan, you would use the fat of the meat. You would leave it on, and you make a flatbread on top of that. So a bit of the taste would go into that. Oh, that's fucking brilliant! And you can do it with raw grain, and you just grind down the grain and you just use that.
He's also forgetting grains can be soaked. And they become soft. They become edible if you soak them in water. Exactly, and cook them.
Yeah, exactly.
But now imagine, instead of a cast iron pan or something, a flat stone.
You could have used a stone for it. Yeah, obviously.
A flat stone, which are fucking awesome to heat up.
We know that they used stones well into the Middle Ages. I mean, as reenactors don't do it because, well, bringing an iron pot or a stone, bringing an iron pot is a lot easier, and an iron pot won't break as fast as a stone would, so we don't use stones.
Exactly, yes.
Hell, I could go to the sidewalk now, take out a stone from the sidewalk, and you could cook on that. It's going to be hard to make it hot, but you can.
Oh, but I tell you, can heat it up quite quickly. A good fire, it heats up stone. Fire. Yeah, good fire. Yeah. So,
yes, real Raven. Italian pizza is made on stone. Well,
exactly. For example,
out of a stone oven.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, let's continue. It's likely, therefore, the early farmers first enriched their diet with a hybrid swill, half fruit wine and half mead. This was actually quite nutritious. Yeah, no.
If it would be true, then it could be true, but it's not.
It's not. Neolithic drinkers were devoted to this precious liquid. No, they weren't.
There is no proof for that whatsoever, and it doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense.
It simply doesn't make sense.
Go on.
If I have enough fruits that I can waste some by fermenting it, then yeah, sure, maybe. But once I know how to make mead, I do not need my fruit for that.
No. And you don't, I think you lose some nutritional value if you ferment fruit, because the fruit has a
You,
lot of
you lose a
sugars.
lot of
Yeah.
nutritional value.
So he's, how can he say it's actually quite nutritious compared to what? To a stick, chewing
You
on a stick?
use a lot. I mean, alcohol is a waste product of sugar, basically.
Yeah, but it's still less nutritious, less calorific
Yeah,
than sugar,
of course it is, because
as it loses.
it loses every step. You lose energy.
So he goes on to say the excavation site of Haji Firuz Tepe in the Zagros Mountains of northwestern Iraq, McGovern discovered prehistoric wine racks used to store airtight carafes. Inhabitants of the village seasoned their alcohol with resin from Atlantic pistachio trees. This ingredient was said to have healing properties, for example, from infections, and they used as an early antibiotics. Okay, so this guy now presents that the alcohol was not drunk; it was used as medicine.
I'm looking at the name Haju Firuz Tepe.
Yeah.
Haju
Uh,
Firuz is it's a holiday in Iran, and it's Haji means slave. Haji Firuz is black slave.
Tepe
So
means
Tepe is the location. Well,
yeah, and it's a mound.
okay, okay.
Tepe in that, and actually it's a Turkish name. Chadal is one of the earliest cities, quote unquote, and Tepe, Jebel Tepe, that's a mound, a ceremonial place.
So
So
why would they call it Haji Firuz Tepe? I'm
I'll,
curious.
I'll G Firuz.
Haji Firuz is like a black slave.
It's an archaeological site, Western Azerbaijan province.
Yeah,
Western
in Iran, and it's
Iran.
claimed to be to hold the oldest evidence of wine production.
Exactly. Yes, it
But
does.
it still would be, but it's still considered to be from the sixth millennium, so 6,004 Christ.
Yes, it is exactly. It's almost it is thick. No, it's pottery Neolithic. It's actually almost close to the Bronze Age. Very close to the Bronze Age.
One sec, I'll be right back. But there is one thing that I want to find. There's one thing I want to say though. 6,000, they find stuff that proves wine production, and he claims 9,000. I don't understand that logic.
Well, yeah. Anyway, this article, and the archaeologist that talk. But I'll continue on with reading and so on. So Tepe means tell, and what is a tell? It's a mound. It's a settlement mound, roughly oval shape, measuring 200. This one has measuring 200 by 140 meters at the base, and it's elevation of 10 meters, more or less. That's what we're talking about, Haji Firuz Tepe. So the Tepe is a mound. So many layers of settlements that were mud type. So this is actual civilizational. This is settlements. They are no longer moving around. So they are settled down. The nomadism has stopped. So that's civilization. It's the next step from tribes to chiefdoms. Now this is the next step between chiefdoms and civilization. Is would be warlords or chiefdoms, etc. No, chiefdoms. Civilization, city states, and that governed an area around them. Yeah, so let's get it. The village's Neolithic residents lived comfortably in spacious mud brick huts, so they were no longer nomads. And the archaeologist and his team found remnants of wine vessels in the kitchens of nearly all the dwellings. Drinking wasn't just the privilege of the wealthy in the village. No, McGovern posits that He adds that women drank their fair share as well. Oh God, this paragraph here is just so fucking stupid. Let's get some context right. 6,000 years ago, people were settled down into villages. They were as the villages seasonally they would have rebuilt on top of or periodically rebuilt on top of the debris of the ancient houses and that, because they were mud bricks. Fucking a rainstorm would have wiped their whole village away. So, for example, they were not daubed and slightly more substantial village houses and that. Now, they found that in every kitchen there were wine vessels. Okay, so they drank wine, which would probably be better than the water they were drinking.
Yeah, that's why they started making alcohol, because water was bloody dangerous.
They were if they were in an area and they didn't take care of their water supply, because not everywhere has springs. They could have been creeks and rivers. So if you're putting all the shit into those creeks and rivers, you are soiling them, you are polluting them, and if you drank them, and now we're getting into the time when there was enough concentration of people where diseases could have been more active.
Yep.
So cholera would have been probably frequent.
Parasites.
Cholera, yeah. Cholera, typhoid, and all those other really nasty diseases would have been quite frequent. So what do if you don't want to get cholera from the water? You drink alcohol. And that's what beer's been done in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, but there's one thing that a lot of people seem to forget: the alcohol content of wine and beer from those periods is a lot lower than what we have now.
Oh yes, so the wine would have been around 7-8%.
Yeah,
it's like what we have wine here. What the hell? What can't you get in? I was too tired anyway. Raven can't go in.
Oh,
I sent him the bloody.
Why can't you go in, Raven? What's the problem, mate?
Send him the link. I sent him a link from my main, but send him the invite as well, in case it's not.
I'll try.
Yeah, if he wants to. He says he's also just too tired anyway. Price kick, Shadilay, my brother. While you do that, I'll continue on with it. Yes, we have wine here in Portugal. It's called the green wine, Vinho Verde, which the normal one that we produce is about 8% alcohol. So I can imagine that it's so fucking acidic that wine, really acidic. So I can imagine that they would be drinking a wine similar to that, and the beer would have had easily 4-5% alcohol. That's the naturally brewed one. If you were to get it more higher, it takes a little bit of a second fermentation. There's some processes which beer production is to get higher yield, and so on. So yeah, and it wouldn't be beer; would be ale, because there's no hops in it. They didn't add any hops, just fermented grains and water. And that's maybe some honey in there to get a bit of more sugar into it. Yeah, so some other stuff like that, because there was no sugar. Maybe not even sugar beets. Sugar beets didn't come from Europe. I can't remember where they come from, but they didn't come from Europe. Sugar beets.
No.
They may have come from... I don't know. Anyway, that's not the point. The point that they were low alcohol compared to what we have now. Average of about, for ale beer, 4.5%. The wine could have topped up in a really good year, a vintage, to about 7-8%. Yeah. Now, in Iran of all countries, yes, we're gonna transport Islam to 6,000 years ago. Yeah, where alcohol consumption is now punishable by whipping good. If anyone remembers that song. The Americans no ale at most. At first, he puzzled over the purpose of the bulbous vessels with wide openings found in the prehistoric settlement of Godin Tepe, a Godin Mound. Previously known wine vessels had smaller spouts. McGovern was also perplexed. This guy was really perplexed by crisscrossed groove scratchings in the bottoms of the containers. Could it be some kind of mysterious inscriptions? Possibly. But it's still no, because there was no, especially this time, writing was not invented for another 2,000, 3,000 years later. In Sumeria and Babylonia, if I'm not mistaken, and they used tallying for accountants of the trade. So back into the laboratory, he isolated calcium oxalate, known to brewers as the unwanted byproduct of beer production. Ale production. Nowadays, brewers can filter out the crystals out of their brew without any difficulty. This resourceful predecessor is working 3,500 years BC, which is 2,000 years what he started off talking about. God damn, this going all over the place.
Yeah, he's all over them. Well, it started with his 9,000, 6,000 mistake.
Yeah. And now it's going to 6,000, 3,500. Yeah. The scratch grooves into the 50-litre, 13-gallon jugs also that the tiny stones would settle out there. McGovern had discovered mankind's first.
You're breaking up, mate. You're breaking up.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, man. The bloody. How about now?
Yeah, you seem all right now.
I moved my laptop a bit. Yeah, he discovered mankind's first beer bottles, which were 50-litre jugs. Yeah, okay.
Calling it beer bottles, I don't know.
Yeah,
beer containers, perhaps.
Containers, exactly. And possibly one or two between houses. That's how mead would have been made. Ale, and these conditions would have lasted a week at most, because they would easily spoil. That's why in the Middle Ages they added hops to preserve it.
Yeah, that's
for longer times. You made ale that lasted a couple of days. You didn't store them. Oh, God, this guy's, and I'm just taking it out of the knowledge which I've studied from years. It's contained in the information that there are actual real studies in the description if you guys want to read up on more. So let's see what he says here. The ancient farmers of Godin Tepe harvested barley from fields near the villages, mashed up the crops using basalt stone. They mashed up the crops. Basalt stone, they were also ground to make bread. Then they brewed the ground grain into considerable range of varieties, enjoying a sweet, caramel-flavored dark beer, an amber-hued lager-like concoction, no fucking hops, and other pleasant-tasting beverages. I disagree. Ales can be fucking bitter as shit.
They are.
No,
that's the whole idea.
Yeah. If you hops adds that bitterness, but if you make a bad batch of ale which hasn't got hops, that can be fucking horrible. Not bitter, but that can be fucking horrendous.
Yeah. But they didn't make it because it was nice. They made it because it was better than water.
Exactly. So let's skip about some part of this. How long this? Oh, we're almost at the bottom, so we can continue. At the same time, the Sumerians were paying homage to the fertility goddess Nimhara, whom they considered to be the inventors of beer, the creators of the Mesopotamian civilization. Yes, correct. At least you got that correct. Sumeria were in the Mesopotamian area. Mesopotamia is the area between the Tigris and the what's that other river name? For fuck's sake, Tigris.
I'm crap with crap with names to begin with.
Mesopotamia means actually land between rivers.
Yeah.
Euphrates.
Euphrates.
God.
Yes. Sorry.
Jesus, I'm there. Oh, I don't apologize. I should be apologizing for not getting it right. I'm the archaeologist.
I knew this too, but I'm crap with names. I really am.
Yeah. So, the main ingredient in the variety of the beer was Emma wheat, the first wheat, that then gave rise to all the other wheats and that. Variety of which has since nearly disappeared. Yes, because Emma wheat was the first, the prototype stock of the domesticated wheats that we have now. It had the hard connection to the husks, which they would tap it, and the seeds that fell would be the next year's harvest. The seeds that remained would be the ones that they were consumed. And so the seeds that fell had the genetic material to have the weakened links, I don't know what the technical name is, that held them to the husks. So that's how the easily to dehusk came about. That's or domestication, as you could say it.
Okay.
Simple.
That I would not know.
That's how it happens. If you're selecting for a trait, and the trait was if you hit it down or the grains fell easily, they would fall into the earth. They would grow to be the next year's harvest, and you would keep the ones that were harder to get. They would be consumed. Now, as that happens over time, they would be easier. They would had to be more careful to get the grains to fall into the basket, or else they would have to pick them up manually by hand from the ground. So that's what happens now. We have used quite easily to thresh the grains to remove them from the husks because of all that evolution that is not natural evolution but guided artificial evolution, selection. So, thus, humans project that started with the first hominins to stumble around under fruit trees reached completion. See, first hominins that stumble around under fruit trees. They would not be stumbling around; they would have been on the ground, so they just have to pick them up. The highly ripe fruit reached completion with the prehistoric beer makers. It's not beer, it's fucking ale. Moderate alcohol consumption was advantageous for early ancestors.
It started being advantageous once they started creating towns.
Exactly.
Because then you can't drink the water. You need a safe water supply. If you don't have it, you need something else.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. He speculates, and they adapted to it biologically. How?
We still not adapt to alcohol.
Exactly. How do we get? Are we so tolerant of alcohol? We need to drink 3 times more than they did. No, we drink about the same amount as they did to get us as high. Well, alcoholics drink more. I need a bottle of whiskey to get really sloshed now. It used to be half, but that's just tolerance. It is a legacy that still burdens mankind today. The archaeologist, however, sees himself as a reasonable balance in this respect. Ancestors on one side of the family that McGovern opened to a very first bar in the hometown of Mitchell. Oh, of course. Ancestors on one side of his family, the McGoverns, opened the first bar in hometown Mitchell, South Dakota. On the other side, however, is a specially puritanical branch of this family originated from Norway and strict avoidance to alcohol consumption. So, where have we reached the end of our article?
Yeah, it's not very valuable.
Absolutely not. More valuable.
He contradicts himself.
A lot. Him and the article writer. Let's see which is the one. This one. I'll stop sharing. So you guys won't. There we go. Yes, he does contradict himself a hell of a lot. So what can you do? It's a really poorly written article.
It is. Maybe I should make a video on it.
Yeah, well, I've done my video on it. I've explained the archaeological aspects of it. You can do any moralistic or some of the
Well, it's not
chemical.
so much moralistic in the moralistic basically only because they're they're lying, and it's I don't this is the same thing that I had when I made that video on what's her name Daphne Joel on brain chemistry.
Yes, yes, I remember that one. Yes.
I don't. I mean, I've read the whole research, so I can basically say what's wrong with it. But if I look at my video, the video I made was purely based on what she herself is saying. So I'm not even using her own article counter her points. It's what she says. In this, if we look at the article we just did, the fact alone that the guy springs from 9,000 to 3,000 to 6,000 to 3,000 again, just to make his points. He's going back and forth. But you can't go back and forth. Time is linear. Once something has been done, it's done. So if it's possible to do at 9,000, then we cannot say that 6,000 was the first time that we can actually find wine proof of wine. Because if 6,000 is the oldest proof of wine, then 9,000 could not have been it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's totally the articles are really poorly written, and and that archaeologist, if you quoted him accurately, which I highly doubt, he probably the article writer from the Spiegel probably didn't know half of what he was talking about. He was just maybe he was drunk. Have you ever thought of that possibility?
That would make sense.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
Okay, I've put up questions to the chat if they have any archaeological questions that for me to answer. Do you have any that you've ever thought about? I can answer most archaeological questions, even modern archaeology. I have just an understanding of stuff.
Okay, I have one, but this is more of a hunter-gathering concept.
Mm-hmm.
How real or how likely would it be that women would go on the hunt with the men?
There is possibility, and I'll tell you the Australian Aborigines is one of the examples that they've been used. This an archaeologist, not just archaeologist, anthropologist, Gould. I can't remember his first name. Stephen J. Gould. He studied a lot of the Aborigines to get comparative archaeology, like I talked about how it was, and it's not unheard of that women could accompany the men on hunts. For example, most likely could have been helping them. Now we're switching to ice to Europe scenario during the last glacial maximum up until any period. But I'm talking about more of the megafauna. The megafauna, mammoths, and those big game were not hunted directly. They were shuttered in to kill areas. The Neanderthals would scare them using fire for them to run over cliffs. Stampede, the stampede instinct that grazing animals have, herd animals have. They stampede. Horses, aurochs, cattle, mammoths, and so on. They stampede, so you could easily frighten them into stampeding to areas. So the women could have participated in that action, for example. Yes.
Yeah, but which would make sense, and it's the modern way of. It's not the modern way of hunting, but it's the way they hunted.
It was modern for them. It was a really effective technique, and you see that from hunting gatherers in Atapuerca in Spain, some other places in France, the Bourgogne area. You see that in Germany, Belgium. You see that in other Czech Republic, the mammoth hunters, for example. I slightly talked about them last week. What's the site? Where they were first actually producing ceramic fired ceramic artifacts. God, I have to go and look that up because I can't remember. What was his name? That name. I have it at the top of my head. Now it'll come back to me. It's in the Czech Republic. That site. It's an open air site. They were mammoth hunters. They constructed their huts using mammoth bones and mammoth hides, etc. And I can't remember that.
Then they would basically, that's like nomadic. They would.
Oh yeah, they were all nomadic. Yeah. All hunter gatherers are nomadic. So, God, I can't remember the name. I love that place. It's in the top of my head, but anyway, yeah, it's not unheard of, and it's not. It's not. It's not out of. They have participated. They had to participate. It was a quote unquote family, tribal affair that everyone participated in. Yeah. Normal hunting would have been the men going out getting 1 or 2 animals for the week, and the women, and like I said, the women and children and the old would forage and small game and that. But when mammoth hunting, that is and mammoth hunting, auroch hunting, horse hunting, and other grazing animals, which they would then preserve. They preserved them, They preserved the food. They would smoke them, dry them, sun dried, and other preservation methods without salt or modern ones, but drying them out or in the sun or would be one way to make like beef jerky. You know what beef jerky is?
Yeah,
that's what. Exactly. That's what they would have produced to preserve the meat, and it would have lasted them for quite a while, especially in the cold, dry climate that the Central Europeans lived in. Not so much to the Iberia and southern France. They would have been slightly more humid, Mediterranean, Atlantic conditions. So yeah. Okay. Anyone? Let's see. I haven't heard about Neanderthals being vegetarians. Can you go into that a bit? Who is saying it? I'll look up the article. I have it here. Let's see. Where is it? They found in Spain. Where is it? No, that's not it. Neanderthals in Spain. They found that they're analyzing the teeth, the caries. The calcified in between teeth. If you don't brush your teeth, you get those calcified growths that you have, right? They found by that new technique, by analyzing those calcifications, that they could identify what type of diet they were, and they found that in the which they analyzed, they found modern human bacteria for the start. So they've reckoned that they were kissing us. We were kissing each other, doing the French kiss, right? No, it's not Karen Cave. The caves. Thank you, BJ Price. It's not Karen Cave. It's an open air site. It'll come to me in a sec. But going back to the Neanderthals kissing and they're vegetarians.
Well, I'd assume they eat vegetables, but I assume they'd also eat meat.
These ones, they don't eat at all, which is really, really surprising. That's why it was making the rounds a couple of weeks ago that they were non-meat eaters. Really, I'm trying to find it. I know it was in the blog, which I love to read. It's the Nutcracker Man, but I'm trying to find it here. where is it? And they found that they were eating mushrooms, vegetable matter, that were kissing us because they found our bacteria in their carries, for example. So that's where it is. I'm trying to fucking find the article. I think I made a video about it. I talked about it. I just can't remember which one. Well, I can't find it now, but I'll leave a link in the description when I found it in this video. So BJ Price, if you want to come back, I will put the link of that article into the description here. Okay, man. I promise. No, that's not it. Anyone else?
I can't help you with that. Sorry.
No. I mean, anyone? Any new questions? Someone? I was hoping someone would. I sent links, but they don't want to learn archaeology. Those fucking cunts. I sent Sandra. He wanted to be on 2 weeks ago. I missed last week because I had a few issues. Nothing important. Nothing to anyone. Personal stuff, and I didn't make it to this. That I didn't make last week's question and answers and so on. And wait, no, that's not it. So if there's no more questions, I think we can wrap it up then. I promise, BJ Price, I will put the link. Cool.
Has Raka hit bat? Who's Raka?
Must be Raka Ali.
What's that about?
He's a musician. He's quite good.
Okay. Not a clue.
Doesn't matter. Let's see. Shit. I need to really organize my link under my browser. No. Ancient humans used toothpicks. I have that. Beringia did that 2 weeks ago. The land bridge. Little Taurus. I talked about that 2 weeks ago. I still love the Neanderthal cannibalism. That's probably one of my best ones that I made. Oh, I'm stupid. Sorry about that.
I wouldn't say that.
No, I am. Sometimes I'm really stupid. And he spelled check. Check. CHE.
Oh, if a goddess is attributed to creating alcohol drinks, would that mean it was found by a woman? It's possible. But goddesses, like gods, do not adhere to our male and female concepts.
I'll tell you why they called it a goddess and why they... Dolny, I've got it. It's Dolny Vescenitsia. I can't pronounce the other name. It's in. I knew I'd get the name. It's the Venus figurines. They were the Venus figurines. You see, in the Paleolithic era, modern human times, we think that they worshipped nature. And how did they worship nature? They would look at the women. For example, women give birth, women produce life, etc. So they would say a woman is the giver of life, so we have to worship her. A woman, not the woman. So they were then in the about 26,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, certain figurines appeared in the archaeological record, which we have named the Venus figurines, and they go from in area the Venus of Hollefels, that's in Germany, I think. The Venus of Montrose, that's also in Germany. The some figurines in figures in Willendorf, I think that's in Austria or Germany, I'm not sure. They found those figurines in France and in the Czech Republic. So this type of belief, a belief system, like we could say the belief, modern religious type belief, but it's not really an organized religion. It's more of a belief. The production of beer from the goddess that be perfectly, the woman would still be the giver of life, the birther, etc. And these figurines had exaggerated mammary glands, which would be feeding, and the buttocks, which is where the genitalia, if you look from behind, like a modern day booty and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's explanation why the goddess was attributed to creating the alcoholic drinks. So yeah, Willendorf is in the Danube in Austria. Yeah, knew it. They found them in the Pyrenees, Siberia, Austria. These Venus figurines, and it's Dolny Westen. God, I can't say the name. But it's an open air site in the Czech Republic. It's a beautiful place. One day I would really love to go and visit there. Yes, I think that did I answer the question, guys, correctly, more or less?
I hope so.
No, or just if to their
I
to
would
their
yeah. I assume that you answered it correctly. I mean,
use sometimes if just to get the names correctly, I open up Wikipedia, which is good just to get the name. But I know all that stuff because it's from my speciality. I did, like I told you guys, I did my thesis, my thesis on this period between 35,000 and Neolithic, more or less. Well, before the Neolithic. And I had to know all that shit. Down Westernicia, the tools, the Solutrean, Magdalenian, or Ignatian, they're all modern humans, tool types, and they are characterized by microliths, small to bone tools, etc. It's just the culture. That's what I mean by culture. So yeah, I still gotta find the bloody Neanderthals. I know I have it here somewhere.
yeah, I wouldn't know about that, to be honest.
I sometimes dream of going. Wish I could travel back in time and go to that period. I absolutely love that period. It's exciting. It's I'll find it soon because I have so many links and I'll probably go back to my videos to find the links. So on the Neanderthals not eating meat. It's not all. Yeah, not all. It's just that's a sample size that they got, and they try to extrapolate to everyone. You shouldn't do that.
Well, bad. Yeah, hashtag not all, obviously.
Not all. In this case, not all. Absolutely. I have a theory, a hypothesis. Not even a theory. It's a hypothesis. Stands really asking a question. I believe that individuals which they analyzed may have been shamans. It's a possibility.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
Yeah, because we know that the Neanderthals actually from that side, as that study as well, used herbal medicines. Because what they extracted from those carriers, they found that they were mushrooms and herbs and spices and herbs and stuff. They were medicinal, in fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are mushrooms that can, at least they don't kill you. If they don't kill you, they're nutritious. But spruce, I think. No, I'm not gonna speak. I can't remember what they actually had there. So there's no point of anything. I know that they thought they were vegetarian. Those Neanderthals. I will put the link. I'll have to find it. I will find it. So yeah, okay. I think we can end it here now, if it's all right.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah, thanks, people, for coming on and watching my little program, and thank you, Modwain, for being here. Oh, are you going to do tomorrow's stream again?
Well, I was going to try it. I was planning to have a stream with Rin. St. Clair said he wanted to come, and Vergentorix, who said he wanted to discuss religious culture and the Western world. So that was going to be the topic. But Vergentorix said a moment ago, actually quite a moment ago, that he might not be able to make it. In your live chat, by the way.
Yeah, I think I saw that. Yeah.
So I'm not. Well, we will go live tomorrow, but I'm quite curious what will happen, because it's a nice subject to once again talk about religion and culture. I think culture is the more important of the two, but still.
Mm-hmm. Well, culture is the all-encompassing concept of that we can't escape.
Yeah.
Culture is that can be passed on to your offspring that is not your genes.
Yeah.
So think of anything, and that's not biological, that's not your genes, that's culture. Your language, your beliefs, the way you pick up a fork, the way you pick your nose, that is culture.
Everything is culture.
It's culture.
So
you can break down culture to, like an atom, to every the smallest bit, which would be how you the shoes that you wear. If they are all sneakers of one type, Nike culture. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's culture. That's one cultural aspect. You are from that culture. The Nike blue sneaker culture.
Mm-hmm.
Paid by Nike, by the way. I'm not advertising it, so they can fuck off. So yeah, okay, people, we're going offline. Thank you again, and good night.
Yeah, sleep well, everyone. Thanks for coming.